In this club I'm going to talk about healing. Of course we know that there is the healing of the body, and there's also emotional healing. The healing of the body, there's still a lot of discussion going on whether what types of medicines we use. Firstly, for if we break bones or damage ourselves physically, that's much easier. We can find ways to repair ourselves. If we have tumours or viruses or whatever, that's much more complicated, and we look for antibodies, we look for operations, we look for chemicals to help us cope with that. And some people go the homeopathic route, others go for modern medicine. The only thing that really interests me is whether I'm cured or not. That's and however I reach that state of being cured, that's what is important. But the other state of healing is the emotional hurt. And as we grow up, many of us grow up in emotional states where we've been hurt, very badly hurt. And it's very difficult to gauge this, because some people are hurt more than others. Some people have the most dreadful lives and they don't seem to be so much affected, whereas some people, just a very small thing can affect their whole life. And that healing is what really interests me. How do we approach that? How do we tackle that? Well, first of all, and the most important thing is to have a positive outlook on life. Life is good. Life is rich, and there is so much to life because there's so little we understand, and there's so much to learn, and there's so much to do. And as I say to people who are depressive, instead of sitting down and dwelling on depression, get out, be active, be involved, do things, and have a look around what you can do. Not what people can do for you, but what can you do? How can you be engaged? What can how can you help people? I mean, if you have a look, and I say to depressed people, if you have a look at all the help that's given to you, it's usually out of balance because people are helping you and you're giving very little back. And it's very important in any healing process, that there is a balance, that you're giving as well as taking, and that's very important. How do we heal ourselves? Well, I always think there has to be time for part of the day or every few days where we should spend time in reflection and having a look at some of the things that we need to look at, and they will come up and we need to look at them. Now, some people think, oh well, I'll go to a therapist, and then they spend hours and hours and months and years talking to their therapist. And all that does for me is just reinforce the problem. It doesn't resolve the problem. Hence, with psychiatrists, you go to psychiatrists and they have the same structure. You go in there and you talk to them and they do analysis. For me, any healing process with somebody is interactive. So once we have identified a problem that we want to work on, then we need to be interactive with that, with someone who can not tell us what is, but allows us to process what has happened to us. So if we've been abused as a child, then once we understand that we've been abused, what does that mean for us? What are the defences we may have put up, the inhibitions that we have? How has that affected our life? How does it stop us moving forward? What sort of emotional development has not taken place because of that? And these are very important issues for everybody, and it's something that we should all be working on. And it's for each individual to take responsibility for their own self-healing, and it's for us to help people be able to create structures that they can do that. So having identified the abuse or the trauma or whatever happened, has arisen emotionally, we need to take time then to go through that process. And the first thing in the process is beginning to find out the reality of that and finding a situation. So if you've been abused many, many times, usually there'll be one focus, one incident that stands out against all the others where you can work on, and which reflects all the other instances. And the other thing is then to open that out, have a look at it, see the reality of it, what does it mean, and go through it. Now this is extremely painful, and self-healing is painful. Just because you have it on board, that doesn't mean to say you're not going to have to confront all the emotions you feel. And invariably it's people feel guilty about the way they feel. So for instance, a child who loves their parents, and their parent is abusive to them, are in conflict, and they feel guilty that they hate for that moment their parent, or have lost a love for their parent, or they're disgusted by the parent's behaviour, yet they loved them. And that is why it's always painful and always will be painful, and there's no quick fix. And so we need to bring that out. So and there are consequences. I remember dealing with someone who came to me and said she'd been sexually abused and by her father. And I said, well, we went through this and it was very painful. And what she wanted then to do, she wanted to know where she went from there. And we talked about it, and she said, well, what do you think will happen? So I gave her 5 different scenarios. I said, this could possibly happen, or this could happen. And one of the things I said, you could say it and you won't be believed. I said the family could turn against you, the mother would certainly turn against you. I said you have to understand that there are consequences. But if she felt that you want to heal her, if she wanted to heal herself, then she had to take some sort of action, reparation for what had happened to her. And so she confronted her father, and they threw her out of the house. Mother wouldn't believe it. 2 years went by, and the mother had been thinking about it and finally confronted the father, and he admitted to what he had done. And she threw him out, and the daughter was to return, and they began the healing process. And she grew very rapidly after that, gained more confidence, was more assertive, had more control out of her life. So the healings that we do is ongoing, and for everyone. And as a society, we should all learn to become facilitators in helping people to overcome problems. Not be judgmental, not giving advice, because you can't advise anybody. You can't say to someone you do that or you do this in these traumatic states. They have to make the judgment, and there are always consequences for your actions. And when I said earlier about I thought depressors ought to be able to do things, that's not judgmental, it's because it's healthy for all of us. Work is healthy, doing things is healthy, gives us status within the community, gives us friendship, it gives us an identity, it's a proper role. Not having that and being isolated and just feeding on one's own misery, it doesn't help anyone at all. So that's not advice, that's just what we should be doing, all of us. And these healing processes, then once we can get rid of these processes, we find that physically we get better. I often think that cancers sometimes are caused, not that I have any real evidence for this, but it seems to me are caused by traumas that we have within us that we never resolve, and they gnaw away at us and fester. And because we have no outlet to release the anger or frustration or the guilt that lie within us. And so to create real health, we need to let them out. We need to express how we feel. We need to let the tears come and all the feeling, the anger, let it go. And I think once we have that release from these traumatic events in our lives, then our body feels better, and we feel better, and we feel more positive about ourselves. We feel more positive about life. And this process should start very young. I mean, we think only adults can have this, but I work with young people, and working with them and seeing it work is very satisfying. Unfortunately, we have institutions like psychiatrists and psychologists who, a lot of them, who live in a backwater, who find all this approach of interaction so very difficult because they themselves haven't gone through the process. They themselves are all locked up and locked down. And if we want to have a free and happy society, this is a process that we need to start with everyone.